Welcome to the Brew Knowledge Podcast, brought to you by Brewlogix. Industry trends sometimes seem like navigating a stormy sea in the dark. Keeping up with them can be an overwhelming, full-time fool's errand. Our next guest is an expert who will help you steer through the noise and navigate your way to better performance. But first, Dan had another great question.
All right, welcome everybody. My name is Dan Hornbrook. I'm here with two of some of my favorite people in the whole wide world, Josh Lindsay and Jeremy Storton, both qualified advanced Cicerone. So I always like to travel with them when I go try new beer because they help me enjoy it even more. So it's always fun. But here I get to pose my tough hitting questions to them. So boys, you ready for today's question?
Rock and roll.
Throw it at us.
Let's do it. So both of you guys have spent a plethora of time hitting brewery events, and I'm going to hone in on events at tap room. So let's not think about the outside beer fest, the sampling, and this and that. What, Jeremy? I'm going to start with you. What are some of your most memorable events at a brewery? One, and then two. What is when you went to an event, you said, wow, this is really unique and this is gonna keep me coming back to this brewery?
Every brewery is unique and it has its own ability to create its own events. An event for one brewery won't necessarily work for another, but some of the ones that really pulled me in, they're the ones that had a large enough space where they could have a mini brew fest and bring all their friends in, and that got me going. Their music is easy, especially if it's outside and it's warm and beautiful. I would also employ the three laws of real estate: location, location, location. If you're lucky enough to have an incredible location, then lean on that hard. I've seen some unique ones that were very science and lecture and astronomy oriented. So they had some very unique events around that to bring people in who wanted to engage at an intellectual level. That was super cool. But I think about the things that I'm going to call them the low hanging fruit. I mean, it could be just a local person doing trivia where I could bring my kids. I remember going to a tap room near my house in Oregon because there was a Star Wars trivia night. And so my daughter and I went. And granted, this is a beer place with pizza. So she had soda and pizza. I had beer. I had several because we were walking. But we had this Star Wars trivia, and my daughter and I had a blast. But the point there was, it wasn't the trivia. It wasn't Star Wars. It was the fact that I could go with my daughter. I could go with my kids. I could bring my family. To do maybe it's like the good old fashioned like egg toss, water balloon toss, three-legged race type of stuff with beer as well. I mean, just get people engaged, bring their families out. And then there are the ones where you just do something completely different and bizarre and off the wall because you have this unique space. Just the creative stuff, maybe a paper airplane flying contest or something like that. It's not hard. It's not rocket science. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. But just do something fun and crazy and all inclusive. It's awesome.
And I know my both my 3-year-old and my 5-year-old right now would die to go to a paper airplane flying contest right now. I can't tell you how many I've made in the past month. Let's just say that.
Well, and if they serve beer, then everyone wins.
Exactly. It would make me more encouraged to keep building airplanes as much as they trash them, how quickly they trash them.
Totally.
It'd be interesting to see how the plane quality progresses as the night goes on.
I could see it. I'm not going to make any jokes right now with the way our flight situation is, but Josh, what are some of the engaging events that you've even, your time at the brewery that you actually put on, or that you've actually been to that you've really enjoyed?
Yeah, I think Jeremy hit a lot of really good ones. Live music is always fun. The brewery I was at previously, we were able to do these all day music festivals that had, up to 7 or 8 really great artists. So multiple stages and things like that. I mean, it's hard to believe you're at a brewery with the quality of the music and the experience that you're having. But I think, something that can be done kind of anywhere is I always kind of go back to like what brought me on a regular basis was some of the different league things. Like I played a dart league at a brewery. And so it kept me coming back on a frequency basis to go and participate, which can be challenging as well if you start something with a league and teams don't show up. But if you have something that's committed, trivia is another one. That there was a brewery that we used to go play trivia at every week. And, a lot of the people that we played with, we only saw each week at the brewery. We met
That's
each
fun.
other doing that. And so like, it became kind of like our own little cheers experience where it's like, when we leave that night, it's like, okay, cool, we'll see you next week. And then, if as far as we all concerned, we didn't even exist beyond that, but that made fun and that created a community. That was something that was unique. So a dodgeball tournament is another one that we had previously done, which was a
Drunken
lot
dog.
of fun,
That's amazing.
Well, we actually did it around a low ABV beer that had like electrolytes and things like that. So like, I think the key is like find something that keys into what you're trying to do. I think anytime you're having an event, you can have an event just to have an event, and that's fine. But I think we've talked a little bit where it's like you're competing with every different experience. So if you can have an event that ties back to your brand and your experience, that will pull you in, or that can pull people in, that creates loyalty. So when I think about experiences like that, some of like the food truck festivals that we did, where each food truck had a special pairing. So like they had a highlight dish and we paired one of our beers with it. And so that created a memorable experience for a lot of people, exposed them to something new. Even things like, cask beer. Come on, we're tapping a cask and you get to have an opportunity to, hey, this only exists one time. This is the only time you're going to get it. And so you get some of that scarcity aspect. So I think, those are the ones that bring me back. As a beer nerd, obviously, I like to go for the beer-centric stuff. But from a family standpoint, think about what are the opportunities that you can take advantage of the love of like Oktoberfest, right? Like Stein hoisting, wiener dog races, keg tosses, all these things. Like you could be doing that in March, that's a traditional festival. What are some other things where you can incorporate that feeling? And I think people who are able to think outside the box will probably find some really cool occasions to create experiences in non-traditional times.
And I would throw
I
in,
could see some like
I was to say, I'd throw in one
Go
last
ahead.
thing is really lean into your community. I used to live in a community that's very, very artsy, musical, and so do an art show. We already talked about live music, but maybe you're surrounded by a bunch of uh, people who are poets. Now, not everyone's going to want to go listen to a live poetry reading, but what if it were an adults only raunchy poetry reading? So you have a little twist on it where it's just like, even if you're not into poetry, you kind of want to go out, have a few drinks, and listen to some crazy stuff. I just get
Let's check
creative.
out what they have to say.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, I think that point, Jeremy, like leverage your community too, right?
Yeah.
Like the Renaissance Fair is something that I always think of. Like it travels all over the country. Like, can you bring in, probably not jousters? That seems a little aggressive. But like, can you bring in a jester, who can do? And then you're getting mutual support. You're getting mutual advertisement where it's like, hey, we're having the jesters come in. They're doing a juggling contest, or hey, there's a trope coming in that does a full hour show at the Ren Fair. Come see 15 minutes of it, and then you can leverage their community as well. So I think when you think community, look outside of your four walls and look at what's going on around you. Whether it's runs and post-run celebrations or fishing tournaments or whatever, see how you can partner with people. Because really, I think that those partnerships take events from just single level to that next level.
Absolutely.
Totally. I'm going to leave with this one thing that I was never into growing up, and I love that the craft community has really picked up around it, is Dungeons and Dragons and
Yeah.
the old D&D. And the brewery I worked at, they had I think it was a weekly event, and they had a nice private space where they could go and do their thing. And it really drew a lot of really, really loyal customers to that brewery. And so, yeah, I think to, find the community around you, find the uniqueness, lean into it, press the gas pedal down, and continue to offer those unique things that just people love.
Yeah.
So,
Create your tribe.
gentlemen, thank you again. And we'll see you next time.
Cheers.
Cheers.
The Brewlogix craft beverage community drives on-premise profitability through our unified technology platforms. Go to brewlogix.com to get started. And now, our interview with the Chief Economist of the National Beer Wholesalers Association, Lester Jones. Welcome, everyone, to the Brew Knowledge Podcast brought to you by Brewlogix. I'm Jeremy Storton. I'm an advanced Cicerone and founder of Good Beer Matters and co-founder and host of the Sense of Beer Style podcast. And Dan's here with us. Dan?
I'm Dan Hornbrook, Director of Customer Journey here at Brewlogix. And looking forward to a great conversation with Lester Jones.
And to round out this exceptional group of haircuts, we've got Lester Jones. For the two of you that have been living under a rock and don't know Lester Jones, I'm going to first of all invite you to come on out from under that rock and join society, because Lester Jones is one of the main beer economists in the country, maybe even the world. You'll have to let me know about that, Lester. But Lester is the Vice President of Analytics and the Chief Economist of the National Beer Wholesalers Association, NBWA. He was a former Chief Economist at the Beer Institute. And basically what he does is he tracks the economic factors that impact the beer industry, the beer distribution industry, and alcohol policy decisions at the local, the state, and the federal levels. I pulled that from the NBWA website, so that's why it sounded so good. But Lester, thank you so much for being here. Do you have anything you want to add to your intro?
No, there are a lot of beer economists out there. We have economists across the associations, and there's actually a bunch of economists that sit at universities. The University of Charlottesville has a couple, Portland has a few. There's a bunch around the world. We had a beernomics conference about 2 years ago, which brought together academics from across the academic space, from universities from all over the world, and they all presented papers on how beer and economics come together. So there's a lot of us out there. It's not as niche as you would think.
Well, then my apologies. But then again, when I think about the beer industry and I think about economists, I think about you and I think about Bart Watson. So kudos to your marketing team for making sure your two names rise above all the rest. But
Yeah,
Lester,
we have access to data, and we
yeah.
have access to regular data that allows us to speak frequently about it and to talk, in many different channels of opportunity for brewers, distributors, retailers, and anyone else who is interested in beer.
Well, and that's why you're here today. So thank you for being here. And I'm gonna
welcome.
step aside, let Dan take this, and we'll get into it.
Yeah, thanks, Lester, and super excited to dive into some of these and to hear definitely the information and wealth of knowledge you bring. So to jump in, with breweries diversifying into more and more, we'll call it beyond beer products, and distribution laws are still kind of guarded around the beer, wine, liquor. I'm going to call it model for lack of better term there. What are distributors and also state legislators seeing for the future when it comes to allowing these smaller independent businesses, craft businesses, to be more diversified in the products, not only that they create, but also that they bring to market? When you think about here in Indiana, you're only allowed to have, beer and wine or wine and liquor. It can't be a three platform distribution model. Just your thoughts on that, and maybe a bit of peek into what some of the challenges are that are facing the industry with this.
Yeah, we're a regulated industry, as you know. We are very alcohol beverage is absolutely different from toothpaste, from toilet paper, to cereal and everything else. It's a regulated industry. It's interesting because Sovos, I got an email today from Sovos, and they led off with the following statement: with 14,000 regulatory changes happening every month around the world. I mean, this is
Wow.
Sovos, right? These are the guys that manage, and they're coming out with 14,000 regulatory changes happening every month. So, it's such a dynamic industry we live in. It is constantly changing. Alcohol is part of every local community, right? And every local community has the option to manage it the way they want. And that's what happened when we ended prohibition. We said, you guys take care of it. We're going to take it out of the federal government's hand for the most part. So, it leaves all of these industry players. I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of industry players right now. And industry players could be a retailer, could be a distributor, could be a supplier, could be an importer, could be a ship handling service. It could be someone logistically handling, not even just logistically handling it, across state lines and stuff. So there's so many players in it. So for beer distributors, in particular, I mean, we see volumetric declines in the beer industry. We had, maybe we're down 3.5% this year. Uh, that leaves us kind of, looking to expand our markets and grow outside of the of the space. So we're trying our best to use all the resources we have: people, trucks, merchandisers, sales folks, to
Yep.
keep our business growing.
Well, can I interject something real quick?
Yeah.
You just mentioned something about the beer consumption is just kind of declining a little bit.
Mhm.
Uh, is that all across the board for alcohol, or is that just beer as opposed to wine or spirits or other?
Well, we had a really interesting couple of years, right? We,
Yeah.
we I, I I look at 2017 as kind of 2017 was really the most important year for the alcohol beverage industry. That's when we kind of really peaked across beer, wine, and spirits. We had a big craft beer boom. We had
Yep.
seltzers were coming on board. Uh, Wine was doing relatively well then. Spirits was doing really well. And 2017 was really an important year because it's kind of like when we really just got full, right? And we didn't know it yet. And in 2018, we're like, oh, something's wrong. And then 2019, COVID hits, right? And then COVID just kind of accelerated what was happening in 2017 and 2018, which was
Mm.
just, this was a super saturated market across the craft beer space, across the seltzer space, across the wine and spirit space. I mean, it was really saturated. And what happened when COVID hit is it just kind of accelerated that, and we saw a lot of things change, and we were all locked down, and the on-premise and the off-premise all got changed. So there's what we're dealing with in 2023 and 2024 is almost what happened back in 2017, 2018, with this big, paroxysm of COVID shutdowns and all that other stuff. It's
So
very
basically,
interesting.
COVID just poured some diesel or some fuel in the fire.
Yeah.
Then just that was
Absolutely.
already burning. Interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. It was it was already lit. We just didn't know we had a house fire. We're just looking around like something smells funny. Where's that smoke coming from? The
Yeah.
reality was it was just an overheated alcohol beverage market in 2017 and 2018.
Huh.
Totally. One thing when you talk about like the overall picture of alcohol, one thing I did a lot of diving into your deck here, so I'm pulling a lot of these numbers from what you had proposed here. Wine has remained 15% of the market since 2012, pretty stable. Um,
Yeah,
whereas beer has lost. I mean, it looks like a dang near an even trade off to liquor since then.
absolutely.
Do you see, I think some of it probably has to do with seltzers and the way they're formulating, that base alcohol product there. But do you see beer stabilizing? Do you see beer coming back? Do you still see kind of liquor stealing from that share in the near future?
I think I like to think, and I've said this for many years, and I have been wrong, and I will say it again and risk being wrong in 2024, that I yeah, that seltzer boom that we had in 17, 18, 19, that just opened the
Yeah.
doors for the spirits industry to come out with canned cocktails and compete directly against the sugar-based brews that are seltzers, was something that is less expensive to make and a little bit cleaner and a little bit obviously different, but it opened that door for them. But the reality is that the RTDs in that canned cocktail space has not only been eating away at the the beer share, but it's been eating away at that 35-40 proof bottle share too. So, so the spirits guys kind of shot themselves in the foot here,
Cannibalizing
because
their
now
own
all of a sudden
business.
they're moving 24-12 cases of product when in a very cumbersome format, whereas before they were moving stuff around in a 9-liter case format, which that had a lot longer shelf life, had a lot higher margin, required a lot less work. So they couldn't help themselves. But now I would imagine there's a handful of them that regret doing this drive into this canned cocktail space.
That's an
You know,
interesting perspective for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
and I wondered how much of just from my time in working distribution, other things, I know that there are other factors involved in how things work. The number one selling brand of beer is not necessarily the one that's purchased the most; it's the one that's forced in the most. Yeah, for example,
Yeah,
but
yeah. Well,
but
you can stuff the channel pretty well.
yeah, but I think about distributors, it's like, well, if beer is declining, is that because people are drinking it less, or is that because distributors or whomever are incentivized to put in wine or spirits at a higher margin and a bigger bang for the buck? How much of that do you see proliferating in the market?
Well, we know from certain data points like the Census of Wholesale Trade that tracks uh, the value of alcohol beverage wholesale and inventory is just through the roof right now. I mean, the distribution, the middle tier of the alcohol beverage industry is very much full right now. It's the most full it's ever been.
Mm,
And I'm pretty sure it's not beer because beer is perishable. And we know
yeah,
that beer's been down, and we know that beer distributors, I survey beer distributors every month through the Beer Purchasers Index, and I ask them, how is your out of code inventory looking, and how do you feel about it? And they've all been pretty, feeling pretty good about it. So it's got to be on the wine and spirits side, which is indicative of a product that has, pretty much an unlimited shelf life. You can let a bottle of spirit sit around for a long time. And, we keep seeing more industry players enter the space, which is just mind boggling. I made fun of it before. I'm like, doesn't anyone read the trade news? Don't they see that inventories are super high? Don't they see that we're kind of full of alcohol? Why are we still seeing people opening, beer breweries, wineries, and distilleries at such a rapid pace? And I guess they just don't read the news and listen to podcasts the way we do.
It is interesting. I think, really honing in on the craft beer world. I think that, earlier when 2020 really put, some safety nets out for some breweries that were able to keep alive a little bit longer, but we're really seeing late into, I think, last 2023 and into 2024, the ones that were on the edge kind of fell off, and the ones that are figuring it out are figuring it out, and they're sticking around. So hopefully there's a bit of stabilization. My hope is this year that that continues to, maybe not so many openings, but just stabilize. Let's not have so many closings, and continue to just figure out our foundation here, a good stable foundation.
Yeah, and we saw, like I said, it was really 2017, 2018
Yeah,
when the fire was smoldering, and we just
yeah.
didn't know it because we were just euphoric about all this opportunity and all this growth and new crafts and new
we
seltzers and new
we'd
distilleries.
we'd
And
spent a decade high fiving each other up until 2017. So
exactly.
yeah,
And,
Yeah.
and we just weren't aware. And, once again, that the COVID economy brought this it happened a lot faster. And that's interesting because maybe it didn't, because we know that there was PPP, there's Main Street Lending, and there was all these other programs that kept some of these guys around a lot longer. But I think what happened is once the money ran out, without COVID, there would have been kind of a natural kind of
Yeah.
culling of the herd, and it wouldn't have been as pronounced as what happened when all that economic stimulus from COVID kind of just ended, and then everyone's like, "Oh crap, I'm out."
yeah.
Totally. Well, to hone in on draft specifically,
Oh,
and
yeah,
obviously, yeah,
yeah.
you
Well, we
know where I'm
need to.
going with it.
Yeah, we need to
Um,
hone in on draft.
it's fallen. I saw 2% since 2012. And then obviously we had all the world shut down, the on-premise bars shut down, draft really fell off a cliff in
Mhm.
2020, and we started seeing an incline back again into 2022, but 2023 it fell off again, and I'm curious to understand kind of how that growth happened, and then it fell off again, and a little bit inside of that, but how are wholesalers reacting to these draft trends nowadays? Are they still bringing in a lot of variation in draft? How are they inventorying it? What does the draft picture look like right now?
Well, draft. Draft's about 9%, nine share of the total pie. It looked like it ended 2023 at 9 share. So It 2022 was about 9.91, and 2023 was about 9%. So it ended with the same. It ended with the same share of market. It's just, we were all expecting it to get back to 10. And that's kind of interesting because you got to remember most of the new innovation we saw in 2023 came in a can, right?
Yeah.
It came in can. We saw a lot of the craft brewers that were traditionally on-premise focused suddenly become much more grocery and convenience focused with more of a can packaged product. So it's not that people didn't want draft. I think it was just that where our attention was all focused on on 12-ounce cans, 16-ounce cans, 20-ounce cans, and at the same time we saw the stadium business come back. And with the stadiums coming back, we didn't see a lot of draft in there. We saw a lot of packaged beer show up at stadiums.
Yep.
The same way, twisted aluminum bottles,
Yep.
large format cans. So, once again, uh, I think some of the on-premise retailers looked at the package format and said, well, getting it in a can package probably preferable because at least I don't have to throw it out uh, if I do get shut down or if it doesn't sell through or whatever. I can, I have some cans that I can at least keep around. And what's also interesting is we forget about what happened to the structure of the brewing industry. So during COVID, the structure was beer to go. Beer to go was not keg, it was canning. And so a lot of small brewers and mid-sized brewers doubled down on their capacity to put beer into a can. Well, that's a capital expenditure. You don't
Yep.
make a capital expenditure and then just wake up the next morning and walk away from it and say, "Oh, I'm done with cans. I'll go back to draft." Right? They had put in canning lines. They had put in orders with Ball or Ardau or the big can manufacturers.
Hmm.
So now they were just proportionally relying on that. And since they invested in it, they're certainly going to continue to run that out as long as they can. So I think that's also what happened in 2023. There was a structural change how we package beer. There was investment behind it, and anyone who knows about ROI is going to kind of follow through till that comes back. But what's interesting is they still have a whole bunch of steel kegs sitting in their yards, that are just sitting there empty. Now, maybe they bought them 20 years ago. They've written them off by now. It's a capital expenditure it's just not front and center on their books that they're looking at anymore. And they're still spending more time concentrating on the can line, the packaging, the boxes, the cartons, all that stuff that has to do with putting beer in cans. So I'm not giving up on draft. I just think
Yeah.
the small brewers and the mid-sized brewers that kind of diverted their attention away will come back to those steel kegs that they already own and will hopefully reinvest in them in the future.
Well, and that makes sense to me, especially because I remember a few years ago we had that aluminum shortage, and so
Oh, yeah.
if you did buy cans, you paid
Bought a lot.
extra,
Yeah,
and
and they
and
bought a lot of them. I
and they
can't tell
bought
you
a lot of them,
how
and they're
many
probably
guys.
still sitting on those. So
Yeah,
we need to get our money back, right? I,
right.
I totally get that. And to be honest, I'm an advanced cicerone, which is fancy for I'm a raging beer snob, or as Julia Hers and I like to say, we're sobs. Uh, Shameful plug. We've got a sense of beer style. Um,
Yeah.
what the point of that is like when the three of us go have dinner at some place, we're like, hey, let's have a great beer. On tap, I expect the usual suspects, and
Mhm.
hopefully they'll like, hey, well, here's our usual suspects on tap. But if you want, we have an Orval or Rodenbrock Grand Cru to go with your
Mhm.
steak, sir. And that's fantastic. I love that. So having that blend of draft and
Mhm.
package, I think is valuable in some of
Yeah.
those respects. But what do you see in the long term? I mean, we're right now we're still looking at we just got out of COVID within the grand scheme of history. What do you see 5 years down the line? How is this going to shake out? Do you think?
Well, I think it's going to be interesting. I think draft probably has a lot of improvements it needs to make. In if you think about it, have you ever you go to your favorite bar and you watch someone set up and they feel the kegs, right? And there may be a little bit left in that keg. They'll pull that keg off and put a fresh keg on, right? So draft inherently, I think, had a lot of wastage to it, a lot of spillage that I don't think the industry was willing to accept. I think the retailers probably made the margin on the keg that they could, and that they were happy with it. But they were always, or you went to a bar and you watched that person hit that faucet and just let it run till it stopped foaming. Uh, every single person that drinks beer has
We've all
seen that happen,
Yes,
yep.
and they've
I
shed a
Yep.
tear,
cringe.
and they cringe and they shed a tear for that spilt beer.
Throwing
You
$20
know,
bills into the fire.
exactly. But with the can package, that doesn't happen anymore, right? So I
Yeah.
think retailers, even though they're paying a little bit more for the can or the bottle, they're probably realizing, a net gain because they're not wasting as much as they were previously. So I think the draft beer industry, as the dispensing industry, needs to get its act together and focus in on maximizing every drop that comes out of that keg. And then they have to go back and re-educate with the retailer and say, hey, Bob just can't hit that thing and let it run and spill all that beer down the drain, because you're that's money, right? I mean,
Yeah.
a distributor buys a keg, inside of that keg is money. A retailer buys a keg, inside of that keg is money.
Hmm.
Why would you have an employee just turn on the faucet and flush money down the drain?
It looks like
There's
foam, but it's not. It's money.
It's not. It's actually money, and you paid for that foam. And the supplier, the brewer made it, the distributor paid for it, the retailer paid for it, and then you have this employee just hits the button and walks away and lets it all go down the drain. It's just we need to educate retailers. We need to get people back on focus that this is a really good package. It's a infinite recycled steel keg. It doesn't go into a landfill. It makes its way around. It's infinitely recyclable. It's kept cold. It's kept under pressure. It's the best fresh beer you can have, right? And if it's a high volume, high moving beer, it's the best way to do it, in my opinion, just because it's an economically sustainable product. You're not throwing that can out at the end of the day. You're not throwing that bottle out hoping it gets back into the recycling stream and doesn't end up somewhere, else. So I have a lot of faith in the steel keg package, and I think we can get it back on track. But that's going to go back to education and working through the 3-tier system with brewers, distributors, retailers, and their employees all paying attention to the fact that that keg actually holds money
Totally.
and
Amen.
not beer.
Lester, we are very passionate about draft here at Brewlogix, and we definitely see, to your point, a lot of education still needs to happen in the world. There's a new generation of bartenders, servers, to doing exactly what you're saying. But I think one thing that you touched on that was interesting is how much is actually left in that keg at the end of the day when they just want to say, let's cut our losses, let's move on to the next keg, without a
Exactly.
true awareness of actually how many dollar bills are still sitting inside that keg, that can be turned into multiplier X of what they're selling it for. So I'm glad that you still see the bright light at the end of the day. We see it
Oh,
as
yeah, I
well.
mean, we have so much opportunity, and a lot of it
Yeah.
just does focus on training and education and the hard work that you just have to do.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
One thing I want to hit on, one of your close to the end of your slides. This is an economic one, from more of a general sense. But the total household debt service as a percent of disposable income is greater now than it was in 2019. So it seems more people will have more debt on their hands, or not as much disposable income as they had in 2019. How do you see that as buying trends, from your point of view, your perspective from a wholesaler? Are they still looking for value packs? Are they still trading down? I've seen other data points where people are trading value price for value products. They want to know that their
Mhm.
product is, sustainable. It's got a good, community piece to it. They're trading value for value, in that sense. How is this kind of data point affecting buying trends right now? Are people starting to go back to, buying those value products for price, value on price?
It's a good question. I've argued for most of 2023 that the consumer was doing much better than they were being told they were doing. So when you read the news, everyone was, inflation is killing you. This is horrible. You're all gonna starve to death in a hovel in a box in the alleyway. And people got really scared from all this. But when you look at real wages, when you looked at employment growth, and you looked at inflation, I mean, a lot of people were doing really well, having
Yeah.
and experiencing real wage gains. And at the same time, we were told that inflation is really high, and it's unmanageable, and it's really hurting the purchasing power. And it's a true story. A lot of people are hurt by inflation. If they went and bought the same things at the grocery store that they bought last month, it was more expensive. But once again, there's substitution, and no one ever talks about substituting. If chicken is too expensive, you buy pork. If pork is too expensive, you buy spam. If spam's too expensive, you buy something else. We always have that opportunity. We live in a market economy that gives us the opportunity to substitute products and services as prices change, and that's what helps keep things in line. So we consistently talk about how consumers are doing, but we fail to really talk about the dynamics of a market economy, which provides alternatives when things are too expensive, and people can go out and find something different. And that's okay. And we've seen that with beer. We know that beer has priced right along with inflation, which is a great story for me, because if you're a retailer and I'm selling you beer, I can show up with beer, wine, and spirits. And if I show you and say, hey, this beer actually keeps price with inflation, which means if wages are going up and utilities are going up and rent is going up and insurance is going up, this is the only product that you actually can put on your store shelves that will keep you above the line, will make you money, because it prices with inflation and people are willing to pay for it. If you look at wine and spirits, they're relatively fat, if not negative, because there's so much of it that it just doesn't have any pricing power. So the retailer actually has to sell more of that spirits and more of that wine just to keep up with the cost of doing business. Whereas you might be selling less beer, but hell, at least the beer that you're selling is keeping up with the cost of you doing business. And as it goes back to the consumer, I mean, the consumers as wage earners, they're all experiencing real wage gains. I mean, the service industry is paying more for wages than they ever have before. And we see that when we go out to eat and go out to drink and go on the airplanes, to go to the hotels and go to conferences and everything else. It's absolutely more expensive, but everyone is moving along. So if we all together made $900 last year and we all made $1,000 this year, we're all on the exact same boat together. We're all just making more money than we did before. And that's the story that we never hear when people communicate about inflation and about the economy in the mainstream media, is that, we're actually all just kind of like at a new level relative to where we were last year, relative to where we were in 2019.
Totally.
Lester, thank you so much. It's very clear and abundant to me that we could sit here, preferably with a beer and a bite to eat, and just keep on rapping about all the stuff. I'm learning so much.
So much to talk about.
There's so much to talk about here, and I would imagine that you feel the same way, that you don't get to tell the full story because there's just not enough time. But for those people who do want to learn more, where can they go? Where can they find you and hear what you have to say?
Well, I typically do lots of different talks, and we have the NBWA website where lots of information is posted about the industry. So they can go to nbwa.org and dig around in there in the industry fast facts and on some of the blogs that I have out there. So there's plenty of stuff out there to follow.
Okay, awesome. Thank you again for your time. Thank you for your insights. This has been fantastic. I appreciate it.
All right, guys. Enjoy your days.
Thanks, Lester.
The advice on this show is obviously not a one-size-fits-all solution. The goal is to provide ideas that will either work for you or stimulate other ideas on how you can improve your business. We hope these conversations were helpful, but let us know what works well for you. Until next time, cheers.